Remember, everyone, Mr. Perfect Curt Hennig was the greatest wrestler to ever live, because nobody beats Mr. Perfect. Nobody. Alright, everyone. Hello and welcome to episode 4 of Curt Hennig Was the Best, Changed My Mind. I am your host, Steph. Today on our Perfect Podcast, we're going to hear my second interview with Jesse Ventura on Clubhouse. I would like to thank Jesse Ventura and his son Tyrell Ventura. I did this interview on March 27th, which would have been the day before Curt would have turned 64 years old. Jesse seemed pleasantly surprised that Curt was only 7 years younger than him, and Tyrell tells a story about Joe Hennig. But before we start, you can find this podcast on Amazon Music, Apple Podcast, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. Go to patreon.com and in the search field type Mr. Perfect is Perfect with the spaces between the words to become a Patreon and support my show. Thank you so much for your support. Okay, let's listen to this and then we'll come back and make comments about it.
That's all I'll say.
Mr. Perfect, we got you up last year on the show or all that, but what's your thoughts tonight?
Well, Governor, if you don't mind me, I have a podcast that I'd like to name drop real quick. It's called Curt Hennig Was the Best, Changed My Mind. You can find me on Apple, you can find me on Amazon and Spotify and Google Podcasts.
Look at that, dropping the podcast. There you go. Well, he was the best.
She calls up the Dropper Podcast. Don't give a crap about nothing else. Let me just go on there and see if I can drop my podcast on Curt Hennig.
Well, and you know what?
It's his birthday tomorrow.
Oh, it is
Governor.
Curt's birthday tomorrow.
He would have been 64.
Really? He'd have been 64?
Would have been 64.
Curt's only 6 years younger than me, huh?
Oh, look at that.
Yeah, he was born in 58.
Oh.
Well, no, yeah, because I was born 51. So that, yeah, and like I said, and me and Adrian wrestled him in the Axe when he was a rookie.
And that was kind of the questions I wanted to ask. So the first question was, when you were in the ring, was it like Randy Savage where you guys were detailing it before the match, or did you guys actually call out moves?
Both. But that particular night was a simple match. Beat the shit out of Curt and give Larry the comeback. There was nothing difficult about that match. Curt gets a crap kicked out of him and gives his father a hot tag.
And the dad comes in and kicks ass for beating.
And Dad comes in and cleans up Adrian and me.
Easy match.
Probably one of the easiest matches I probably ever had to do.
Did they ever make faces at you? Did Larry or Curt ever make faces at you? Because I know Bret Hart was saying Curt would make faces at him. Sean Stasiak said that
other than that little brief thing with Curt, I never worked with Curt again. I broadcasted him. But by the time Curt got to the WWF, I was in the broadcast booth. So I never worked with him at all there. I worked with him only when he was a young rookie in the AWA. And then I went on but I worked with his old man. Probably,
what was that like?
I think I wrestled his old man more than I did Curt.
What was that like, wrestling Larry Hennig?
I loved it. Larry was a big, powerful guy, but, Bobby Heenan used to tell me, how the hell do you give yourself to Hennig? Because he'd throw you in and give you that forearm, right, and all that. And I looked at Heenan and said, he's never, ever potatoed me. He'll keep getting me as long as he don't hurt me.
Yeah.
And Larry never hurt me. It looked like he did, but, he looked like he'd hurt anybody. No, Larry was a great worker.
I'll give you this, too, because obviously you're a huge Mr. Perfect fan. The other bit of Ventura family trivia with the Hennigs is that I actually went to high school with Curt's son, Joe Hennig.
Yep. You were telling me that on the other show.
Yeah. Me and Joe went to high school together, and then Joe went on to wrestle for Vince for a long career, actually, for doing what he did. And I always looked at Joe and we kind of laughed because I was like, Joe would have been if I could have easily followed Joe's career, but I just wasn't into wanting to do the wrestling thing. So it's like.
Not only that, Ty, but You didn't want to do the eat and put weight on and lift weights thing either.
No, I did not. No,
in which case, to get into that business, it's kind of a prerequisite.
Oh yeah. But I'll say this, man. Knowing Joe in high school, Joe was a phenomenally nice guy. Still is today. I saw
the whole family is.
Oh yeah, I saw Joe at the reunion.
The whole Hennig family is wonderful. One of the saddest days of my life was going to Curt's funeral.
I can imagine. Yeah.
And Larry just walked up to me with tears in his eyes. And what do you say to a father who's burying his son?
So sad.
It's one of the most horrible days. I had to go, of course, but I'm not going to say it was a wonderful experience.
No.
It wasn't. It never will be.
If you could tell Curt one thing, what would it be and why?
If I could tell Curt one thing, what would it be and why? I would just tell him he was one of the most phenomenal wrestlers mechanically that I had the chance to broadcast. That he was a wrestler who was completely on top of his game, and everything he got in the business he earned and deserved.
Very true.
And can anybody tell me what bear hunting with a switch is?
I have no idea.
Bear hunting with a switch. That's what Larry used to do, they said.
Yes.
Well, what that means is, what that defines out to mean is that he's so big, he could go up in the North Woods and fight bears, and all he needed would be a switch.
Yeah.
In other words, he could smack the bear on the ass and the bear'd run away.
Well,
I believe that would be the definition of it. If he smacked the bear on the butt, the bear would run away, so Larry could go bear hunting with a switch.
There you go. Well, thank you very much for coming up, Miss Perfect. Have a wonderful night.
All right, and on that note, we'll be out of here.
Okay, and we're back. So just going to make a few comments here about every little question that I asked. So at the beginning here, I just wanted to name drop the podcast. There might have been people who didn't know I even had one about Curt, or about, how I talk and blah, blah, blah about his career. It was a great career. I think it was a great career. I think he kind of wishes it was, he was the champ, and he deserved to be champ. If you listen real carefully, you can hear, like, when I say, oh, well, Curt was the best, and you can hear kind of Tyrell say, yeah, he was the best. See? I agree. So, and the fact that people have overwhelmingly downloaded, I have over 100 downloads now. Thank you so much. I'm so overwhelmed and very, very happy with, that people want to hear me blah, blah, blah about, the greatest wrestler to ever live. So, I wasn't trying to take away from anything from Jesse. It's just, I just wanted to, tell those people who haven't heard of my podcast before. I'm always reaching out to, new people. Oh, hey, she's going to talk about Curt Hennig. Hey, great. I liked him too, that kind of thing. So just to pull more listeners in and kind of get that fan base going, because I know Curt, if he could listen to the podcast, he would probably be overwhelmed and smiling from ear to ear. Oh, you're going to dedicate this all to me? Oh, how sweet of you. That kind of thing. And honestly, I wish I could call Curt, and interview him. That would be so much fun. I think he would, play some pranks or something, but hey, that's what Curt was, that's Curt. That's what he would do. But I love how Jesse kind of, joked about it. And every time he's like, you call up and you just say, screw you, just let's talk about my podcast. No, that wasn't the point. It was just name dropping because I was just trying to, build my audience and kind of let everyone know that maybe hadn't known before. So that was the first part of it. So after, I name drop, of course, I, also wanted to tell Jesse that it was, and what was cool was, after we started talking about Curt's birthday, and Tyrell goes, yeah, it would be Curt's birthday tomorrow. And I think Jesse was like more pleasantly surprised, like, Curt would have been 60, or Curt's birthday's tomorrow. Yes, it was March 28th, and I said, yep, he would have been 64, and Jesse was like surprised, kind of like taken aback. He would have been 64? Yeah, he was born in 1958, March 28th, 1958. And he's like, oh, I was born in 51. So, I just, well, he says 6 years, but I don't think Jesse had his birthday yet. So it would have been about 7 years. About 7 years apart. And, I just want to thank Tyrell and Jesse for doing this, because they absolutely did not have to do this. But one thing about Curt is that, I often wonder what he would do on his birthdays. I've said this in other episodes, but I do truly wonder what he would do. And the only answer I could come up with is wrestling. It was his life. Even if he, kind of grumbled about it, I do think that he honestly loved wrestling to the point of it was his life, and I don't see him doing anything other than maybe a movie. I could see Curt being a movie star. I think he would be a great leading male actor. I could see him getting a couple of, Grammys or Emmys or whatever they are. I don't really follow that stuff, but I do think that Curt would be a great one. And Jesse was one too. Recently, my father and I were actually watching Predator, and I got to see the part where Jesse gets killed. And I do admit that Jesse, he does die great. He was talking about that on another Clubhouse edition. And he was saying, like, everyone would call him up and say, hey, can you come die in my movie? Because when he dies pretty well. The only part, Jesse, I will say, is that I did see a little bit of a mistake. And I think it was because the camera was way too close to him. But when the guy is sitting there looking at Jesse, why did you die? That kind of thing. It's like that emotional take where the guy's like, why did you die, man? Even though he doesn't say anything, it was the black gentleman kind of like looks over him like, why did you die? Anyway, if you look real closely, you can see Jesse's eyes move. I was like, whoops, I don't think they were supposed to see that. Because you could tell Jesse, at that point, you're like, oh, he's not dead. But I will admit that I did watch that scene again, and Jesse, you did excellent dying in that movie. And I really would love to see The Running Man. I know my dad was really shocked. He's like, you haven't seen The Running Man? I'm like, no. And I would love to, because Jesse, on another edition of Clubhouse, he's on Wednesdays at, it would be 7 Central and 8 o'clock Eastern. And they go till 8 o'clock Central, 9 o'clock Eastern. That's Sundays and Wednesdays. And then on Wednesdays after Jesse goes on, Tyrell kind of has his own little rendition of Clubhouse. So if you'd like to check that out, go ahead and check that out. It's really easy to sign up for Clubhouse. So, but anyway, I have not seen The Running Man, and I would love to, because Jesse said that it was his arm that kills the other, I guess, bad guy in the movie. And see, I think the whole wrestling thing, that Jesse was a heel, I think made him, a good heel in a movie. Because if you think about it, wrestling is sort of like a movie. It just, there's more physical action, or there's supposed to be. I don't know. I don't watch wrestling today, so I can't really tell you if it's, action-packed. But I know the wrestling I grew up with was more, if you can get over the WWF at that time was, superhero, larger than life wrestlers like Hogan and, it's kind of like, where does Curt fit in there? Curt was the exception to the rule. He was the real wrestler. He was the real deal. The real action-packed hero. Even if he was a heel, he still was kind of a hero because, every guy wanted to be him. He could bowl. He could, throw darts. And I've been told that he can throw darts even when he's drunk. There's I believe it was Conan had an interview with, I don't know if it was Rey Mysterio. No, it was, Disco Inferno, the guy who was Disco Inferno in WCW, did a interview with Conan, and they were talking about Curt, and he's like, yeah, Curt was drunk, and he could still throw darts. I was like, really? Interesting. I can't imagine. But yeah, like, Curt was that good athlete, and, every guy wanted to be him, and I guess every woman wanted to be with him. That kind of thing. So, I definitely see the appeal. But I'm just so happy that I was able to talk to Jesse and Tyrell, especially about Curt's birthday. So the first question that I asked Jesse in this second interview was, did they, detail before the match? Did they sit there and talk about how the match was going to go, and write it down? Like, because Randy Savage, if you ever see interviews of Savage, or not interviews, but if you see like any documentaries about him, he was very detailed. So Savage wanted to see the match and write it down and kind of see it in his head, which I think is a good strategy. That way you could sit there and go through it and you don't forget anything. You want to tell a story and you write it down so that you honestly won't forget anything. I think that was a brilliant thing to do. A lot of guys didn't like that, but hey, he just wanted to tell a good story. So, but, it's not everyone was like Savage and, when they would talk about matches and stuff. So I was kind of like, do you put in the details beforehand, or do you just do the match on the fly, is what they would say. So you would call out moves. And I have to be honest that you don't hear me talk because I don't hear, like, there's a moment of like silence between Jesse, me, and Tyrell, because at first the Clubhouse, the app, sometimes like you don't hear the audio. So I didn't hear him say both. When he said both, I didn't hear that until the playback. I didn't hear anything. I thought he, was just like, it was kind of like dead silent. He didn't hear anything. So I didn't even know he answered the question until the playback. So he said both, and I was like, on the replay, and I was like, oh, okay, that's so cool, because like I said, I didn't hear that in real time. I thought, uh-oh, am I still on? That kind of awkward silence. But then you hear him say, oh, it was one of the easiest matches I ever did. It was just, we beat the shit out of Curt, and then he gives Larry the hot tag, and Larry comes in and starts beating the crap out of me and Adrian. And Jesse kind of said that in the first interview, that, Larry would come in and beat the crap out of Jesse and Adrian, and I more or less wanted to know if Jesse was like the, kind of like in the ring where he would just call out moves. Hey, I'm going to do this move now. Or if he was more like, the Macho Man, where Savage would actually write everything down. Because back then, and I know a lot of younger viewers won't know this, but they actually told stories in wrestling, where, this guy was fighting this guy for this reason. And I can see the match almost, even though I don't know, I haven't seen it, on YouTube or anything, but the way they talk about it, like I can kind of see that where they're just beating on Curt for 10 minutes and then, here comes Dad. Oh, you're gonna beat up my son? Okay, I'm gonna beat up you. That kind of thing. I mean, and who wouldn't do that for their kids, right? All of us would do that for our children because, they're our flesh and blood. But yeah, I can, that was Jesse says it was such an easy match, but I just wanted to know the mechanics. So is it like this? Did you guys sit and talk about it? Did you write anything down? I don't know if they wrote stuff down. I don't know if Curt was kind of that way. I don't think Jesse was that way. I think they just stood around and talked about it. Like you could do this and this will be a cool move to do, and we could just beat the crap out of your son. This is a story we want to tell. We're just going to beat the crap out of Curt, and then you just come in and save the day. Like a hero dad. I guess that's kind of how I see it. And what's funny is that Jesse and Tyrell had been talking about on a recent episode or edition of Clubhouse, they were talking about who would be if you could have one, who would be your villain wrestling father. So a little backstory before we go into who I would pick. So a gentleman had called up and said that he believed the reason why people gravitated towards wrestling was because they had either no father or a father that wasn't really in their lives. Okay. Which Jesse said, well, that's not true for me. And I remember sitting there going, yeah, that's not true for me either. Because I had a great dad. My dad was awesome. And let me tell you, yes, I am a baby girl. I am a daddy's girl. So, I mean, my father and I, even today, are still very close. Kind of like Curt and his father were very close up until the day Curt died. That's how I am with my dad. So, to be honest, I watched wrestling because I'm a girl and they're guys, right? You guys know what I'm talking about. I'm not going to go into any lengthy details. So, but yeah, it didn't fit for me because, like I said, I had such a great father. So, I just watched wrestling because it was great to watch. The men. I got to thinking, who would be my heel wrestling father? And I sat down and I thought about it, and I thought, well, Jesse could be my dad. No offense, Tyrell, but your dad's pretty great. And like I said, this is no offense to my dad. If he's listening, Dad, I love you. You know that. But, if I didn't have a dad, or if I was born into, the wrestling life or the wrestling style, yeah, I was thinking, yeah, Jesse could be my dad. That father figure that you would gravitate towards, I guess. But then I got to thinking, wait a second, time out. Larry Hennig used to be a heel. See, I don't know because I only know that I've only seen the matches where he was a babyface with Curt. So I never really got to see Larry Hennig as a heel. What I did see is a brief heel, maybe like a heel kind of storyline of when they turned Curt heel. He became the AWA championship, and he was against Greg Gagne. Well, they had Larry and they had Vern Gagne tied together. So, it was like when Vern would try to get in to help Greg, Larry would pull him back. And when Larry tried to get in to help Curt, Vern pulled him back. So it was like, well, if I can't help my son, neither can you. So it was kind of like Curt versus Greg without their fathers getting in the way, that kind of thing. But I honestly have to say that it was an eye-opening, because I've never seen an interview where Larry was kind of like, we're the best family, and the Hennigs have always been the greatest wrestling family to ever come into the business, or something like that. And then, of course, it was, I had to laugh because Curt talks about bringing his little sister down. Like she's like some 6-year-old little girl gonna beat up on Greg Kanye. It was so funny. He's like, I'm gonna bring my little sister down and kick the crap out of you. That kind of thing. But I was thinking, because of this, I heard an interview with Eric Bischoff, and he talked about how Larry Hennig was a heel. I thought, really? Well, heck. Larry Hennig could be my father. And then I was like, well, what about Jesse? that kind of thing. So it's a tie. For me, it's a tie. And I would love to tell Jesse this. I tried to get up on my birthday. My birthday was 4/20 this past Wednesday. And unfortunately, the audio on Clubhouse was not working, so I couldn't get to tell Jesse any of this. But yeah, I think it would definitely be a tie between Larry Hennig and Jesse Ventura. Would be my two fathers there that I would gravitate towards if my dad wasn't as great as he is. So, but yeah, this match, Jesse loves to talk about it. And it's because he doesn't remember the other match he had where he was solo against Curt. And Curt actually lost that match, even though Curt was the babyface and of course Jesse was the heel. But, that's how I guess you would get heat. So it got more heat for Jesse. Being a heel, you want heat. And Jesse was talking on another edition, of Clubhouse. He was talking about, how you got so much heat that you had to hide in an ambulance because people were literally going to come and just kick the crap out of you. I was like, really? Yeah, he was talking about like hiding in an ambulance so that the fans who were waiting around to beat the heck out of you wouldn't find you. So, they were waiting around saying, I'm going to beat that, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to beat him up, that kind of thing. And to hear Jesse tell the story of like, they're waiting in the back and you have to hide in an ambulance because they think whoever's in the ambulance is probably hurt and going to the hospital, right? Like someone had a heart attack or something. He's like, yeah, we would hide in the ambulances because we had so much heat that we had people waiting around to beat the crap out of us. I was like, oh my, that doesn't sound like fun. I've heard Jim Cornette kind of say the same thing, where Jim actually would have to, I guess he would carry around a tennis racket and he would have to beat people in the fans back. He actually said he full blown hit a guy in the face with the tennis racket. I'm like, oh my gosh. I can't imagine as a fan being so angry at someone for beating up the baby face because I was so unconventional. I liked more heels than I did baby faces, which is kind of like the flip of a real, I guess, a fan, not a real fan, because I don't know if we can call us real fans, but it was kind of like it was like the flip side. So I liked most of the heels. So Hogan, when he was in the NWO, I liked Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, when they were in the NWO. I mean, the NWO, they were heels. That was the whole point of Hogan changing over from I'm a real American to I'm in the NWO and I'm a heel. And I think Hogan made a better heel than he did a babyface. And Curt was the same way. I think Curt made a better baby face than he did a heel. But he could do both. So, but yeah, like, I didn't like any of the baby faces like Sting. Didn't like Sting. I didn't like, Lex Luger. Hated Lex Luger. I still do. I'm just like, every time anyone talks about Lex Luger, I'm like, really? You want to talk about the narcissist? That's the gimmick he came in with to, the WWF. And I will still call Lex Luger the narcissist to this day because I cannot stand him. The only thing I liked is the interview he did about Curt Hennig where he's like, he totally forgot about the whole match at WrestleMania 9. Oh my gosh. Like, everyone was like, oh, it's a rib. He was just ribbing you. But if you go back and watch WrestleMania 9, as I have, I don't really see where they forgot. Or maybe like Curt started remembering, but Curt, I guess, was so sugared up. You know, like he was so caffeinated up that he just totally blanked out. Luger said when they went to, you know, go for that first hookup, Curt kept going, I don't know what I'm doing. I forgot. And Luger was like, you know, he's all cool and collected because, again, with the interviews about Curt Hennig, all you heard was, oh, you know, you got a night off with Curt because he knew exactly what he was doing and you knew he wasn't going to hurt you. And the moves he did weren't going to hurt you. You weren't going to feel anything later on. Whereas if you had someone who was a little more green, no way that you were going to feel that way with Curt. It was going to be different. So, because, you know, Curt was the consummate professional. He was the greatest wrestler to ever live. So, in a sense, to me, it sounded like, oh, he's just ribbing him. But Luger swears up and down that Curt was not ribbing him. That literally Curt just totally blanked out on the match and was so like, I don't know, maybe if he was just excited or like he, you know, the caffeine, you know, he must have drank a lot of coffee beforehand and was just so excited about WrestleMania 9 that he just completely forgot the match. So, I do like that interview with Lex Luger, and that's the only thing I like about it. I mean, I didn't even like the Steiner brothers. I did not like the Steiner brothers at all. I was just like, really? Didn't like them. If we went to when I was more of I guess I kind of did like Hogan when he was a baby face, but not as much as I liked Bret and not as much as I liked Curt. I did like Bret Hart for a while, even when Bret was a heel. And it's kind of funny that they turned Bret Hart heel right on 420 in 1998. So I would have been 12 years old. And they turned Bret heel right on my birthday in 1998. Like, if you watch the Nitro, the WCW Nitro, Bret turns on, I think it was Savage. Because, you know, Savage and Hogan were kind of at odds at that point. Even though, and everyone thought, oh, the NWO was going to break up. The NWO was going to break up. And Curt and Rick were kind of doing their own thing. But at that time, I mean, that was before the Wolfpack. So the Wolfpack didn't come till like May or June. It was more like middle of May of 98. And then, of course, Curt joins in May. But anyway, like, literally, it was like right on my birthday. I remember that. And then, like, the next Nitro, you see Bret Hart was talking about, and he had this Hogan shirt on. You could see him kind of take his jacket off, and he had this Hogan shirt on. And I wonder what Bret was thinking about that interview, but it was kind of like he was praising Hogan. You know, you're the highest paid athlete, you know. I mean, I guess he was at the time, but, you know, Bret was saying, so I would say I'm just not the normal fan, because I liked mostly the heels. Wasn't much for Warrior, but then You know, if you hear interviews about Jim, he wasn't really that much to behold. So, and it got worse as he got out of wrestling and started his speaking or whatever. I mean, wow. And Jim Cornette talked about that too. So, but anyway, I can't imagine getting so much heat that like fans want to kill you. I wonder sometimes if Curt ever had to like punch someone in the face, like, you know, get away from me, that kind of thing. I mean, hey, if the fan deserved it, I can't tell you how many times I've seen in WCW where it was Halloween Havoc, I think. It was Piper and Hogan in the cage, and there were fans, well, a fan, climbing the cage to get inside. You had a fan dressed up as, I don't remember if he was dressed up as Sting, but he was, you know, climbing the cage to get in to get to Hogan. I mean, that's dedication. But also, I believe, once you cross that line of you're going to climb over the barricade that they have there, you know, so the fan, you know, they can tell the difference between the barricade and the fan, where the fans start sitting. Once you go over that line, you go over that barricade, you are free reign to any of those wrestlers. The wrestlers, in my opinion, have a right to beat the crap out of you. And I still believe that. And I don't feel bad for any, I don't feel bad for any fans that got hurt. Because if you watch some of the WCW stuff, I mean, they're throwing drinks, they're throwing golf balls. I mean, one of the referees gets hit in the face with a golf ball because the fans are throwing stuff. And they would throw stuff at the NWO. If you looked all over the ring was literally full of just like beer and Coke and nasty stuff. I don't know how the wrestlers even took any of that stuff. I wouldn't, because I remember Curt gets hit in the head with a bottle, or maybe it was a drink of water, but he got hit in the head. You know, someone was so mad at him for closing the door on Flair's head, they literally just threw this thing and it hit him right in the head. Oh, that's so horrible. But, anyway, we go off on a tangent here from time to time. But that would be, that is my solution to that, so. So we move on to the next question, which was, you know, did Larry and Curt make faces at you? And I say in there because, you know, if you listen to Bret Hart, they did an interview with Bret Hart, and Bret was always saying how him and Curt were almost rolling on the floor laughing because they would have inside jokes they would, you know, when they wrestled each other. They would have like these jokes that they would, you know, almost be laughing in the ring about. I love how in Bret's book he talks about Curt. Such admiration for him that if it wasn't for Curt, he wouldn't have done this, he wouldn't have done that, and he could confide in Curt, but he could also, he wasn't going to get hurt. And everyone talks about that SummerSlam 91 match. Yes, it's hard to watch. If you know from us perspective that Curt was hurt. You know, he had hurt his back really bad. But listen, when you read Bret's book, listen to the way he talks about Curt, because it's just, you know, it was like we could do anything and he knew Curt wasn't going to hurt him by trying something else and doing something stupid. So it was like, you know, it was spy versus spy is what Bret would say. And it's because they were so evenly matched. They're both second generation. They both knew how to wrestle. They were great mechanics in the ring. And like I said, the whole point of the question was to see, even extending to then when Curt was a rookie or still kind of new to the business, did he actually let himself go? And did he make faces at Adrian Adonis and Jesse? I think Jesse kind of took it to, oh, did he ever make faces at you? And I was more just talking about that match specifically, only because when he was a rookie, Curt seemed so serious. You know, he didn't see him at the time, I guess, like, cause I watched matches from 1982 of Curt just kind of like, he was very, very serious. That's how he came off in the ring. I don't know if he was, you know, cracking jokes with Rip Oliver and Buddy Rose. I don't know if he was doing that, you know, cause you just see this very serious look on his face. He probably was cracking jokes then when he was really, really young. It just, you don't see that. I didn't get to see that. You know, whenever I watch those older matches when he's in Portland or he's in AWA, he has a very serious look on his face. And when he gets to the WWF, it's more like he opens up. So I could see him and Brett, you know, having these inside jokes, and Curt would say something and then Brett would be like, you know, try not to laugh. But I think that's wonderful. And I think that's awesome that, you know, Curt would make Brett kind of feel better and, you know, like, hey man, did you hear about, you know, blah, 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 you know, this joke or that joke, and kind of make him feel better. I've heard that's just the way Curt was. You know, he just wanted to make everyone laugh. The Shawn Stasiak, I saw that interview. He talks about how a lot of people blamed Curt because Shawn Stasiak lost his wallet or something. I'm not really sure what that was all about. All I know is that Shawn Stasiak said that him and Curt had a match together, and Curt was supposed to be selling for him, or selling, and I guess he was over at Shawn Stasiak making faces at Shawn Stasiak. And that's not the first time I've heard where Curt would make faces at people. Like, you know, to get them to laugh and stuff. I've also heard the story from the Nasty Boys, and I finally figured out who the person was. The booker was Wahoo McDaniels. Apparently Curt had a beef with him and got the Nasty Boys all drunked up, and they went in Curt's truck to the hotel room where Wahoo McDaniels and Ray Stevens were at. And I guess they had taken these Roman candles and started, you know, boom, 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 bang, bang. And by the time it got back to Vern Gagne, they had burnt down the hotel. They didn't. But, you know, I guess Vern had heard through the grapevine that supposedly Curt, because of Curt and the Nasty Boys, or the Nasty Boys had supposedly burnt down a hotel. And, I think it was either Brian Knobs. I think he was saying, yeah, Curt's making faces at us in the window. So it's not the only time I've heard of Curt making faces at somebody to try to get them to laugh. You know, that was just Curt's sense of humor, and it was awesome. But, you know, you could tell Curt was kind of serious when he needed to be. If you watch his babyface turn, there's some times where I think he just wanted to bust out laugh because he looks at the camera, and that was kind of like the thing. Like, I wonder if he was like always like not melodramatic, but like in his babyface turn in '93, he kind of, every time someone would say something, he'd kind of look over at Bobby, but then he'd look back at the camera like, do you guys believe this? And I was just like, oh, Curt, aw. Like, cause you felt bad for him, cause, you know, you knew the story that they were trying to tell is that they kept Curt on the back burner. You know, they tried to keep him out of action because they were trying to give Ric Flair the spotlight and stuff like that. So, in his babyface turn, I think his serious demeanor was funny because he kept like looking at the camera going, do you people believe any of this stuff? Please tell me you believe any of this stuff. Do you believe what they're talking about? You know, like he was getting that sympathy, you know, and you could feel like the babyface turn about to happen because, you know, it was like it was just his demeanor and the way he was, the way he came off, I guess. But he kept looking at the camera. I just would, I don't know. It's like, but that's not the only time I've heard of, you know, Curt's sense of humor and his, and as everyone knows, Curt was the king of ribs. You don't know how many ribs I've heard over the years about, you know, oh, Curt did this and Curt did that. And they actually asked Eric Bischoff, did Curt ever rib you? And he's like, no. He said, I never been ribbed. I've heard of the ribs, but I was never ribbed. I was like, oh, darn it. Curt, you should have gotten Eric Bischoff. Oh, that would have been great. I would have laughed so hard. I would have been like, ha ha. But yeah, I don't doubt for a second. And, you know, I've heard, just that he was larger than life. He was a great guy to be around. So the next question was, what was it like to wrestle Larry Hennig? Because I know Jesse fought Larry Hennig more than he did Curt Hennig. And I've seen some of Larry's matches. I think they're awesome. I just love how, if you ever see the matches he has in Portland with Curt, he's just, like Curt, he's like larger than life. And you could tell the sense of humor of Larry and just the way he would bounce around like, yeah, I'm a powerful guy. I don't care. Bounce around. So I think that was like Larry's sense of humor coming out because like he was like, oh, you want to beat on my son? Mm-hmm. No, you ain't going to beat on my son. But like I said, I would be honored if Larry was my father. So, man, I got to give it to Curt because he had a great dad. But I had a great dad too. So, anyway, and like Curt, you know, everyone was like, oh, you know, you had a night off with Curt. You didn't have to worry about Curt hurting you. It was the same for Larry. You know, no one ever came to, so far I've never heard anyone say, well, I hated Larry Hennig, I hated fighting him, and he was horrible, and blah, blah, blah. No, it was just like Curt, you know, everyone was, you know, I heard an interview from Piper because, I know from Roddy Piper's ghost story that Larry Hennig was his first pro match. And Larry beat the crap out of him, is what he said. But if you, I heard, this was Stone Cold's podcast. Stone Cold did an interview with Roddy Piper, and Piper talked about how, Larry is the one who taught him how to eye gouge. So even though Piper wasn't really doing it, and Larry had at the time, apparently someone had said something to Larry, and Larry was like, hey, don't talk like that. You know, I'm a family man now. I can't talk like that, or I can't act like that anymore. And Piper says, you know, this guy, this other wrestler was getting up in his face and everything, and Larry just poked him right in the eye, and he said the guy just doubled over, and he's like, oh my God, my eyes, you know, that kind of thing. And Piper's like, wow, I want to do that, but not, you know, for real or anything. But yeah, like Piper just attests his eye gouging ability to Larry Hennig. And it's because he watched him actually eye gouge someone in real life. But wow, when I heard that story, I was like, really? I can't imagine Larry being that violent. But hey, you know, he Larry was sticking up for his principles. He wanted to be a family man. He had kids. He had 5 of them. So, yeah, you don't want to be like, I guess you don't want things to go around that you're a horrible person, you know, even if you're a great dad. But, I do know, because I've seen Larry's sense of humor. There was an interview that Larry did later on where he's like, all my grandkids are numbered. I went, wait, what? All your grandkids are numbered? And all I could think of was, I was like, wow, that means you have a lot of grandkids. But it was just, a big joke because, he did have so many grandkids. And it's hard to remember everyone's name as you get older, I guess. And of course, there's always the Larry Hennig, and we'll talk about it later. But you got to see where Curt kind of got his sense of humor, and it's from Larry. And just the funny things that Larry would say. I can't imagine. My dad has a great sense of humor too, so I guess that's where I get my sense of humor. So I could definitely see it and if you just watch some of the Larry Hennig matches, there was an arm wrestling match. Well, that was good too. I forgot who that was against, but I did find that on YouTube, and boy, that was good. So, I don't doubt it for a second that Larry wasn't a great wrestler, and he was, larger than life. And Bobby Heenan, it doesn't, I don't know if he ever managed Larry Hennig. I know he managed Curt, but I know he didn't manage Larry, I don't think. But I think Bobby Heenan would have been great with Larry. And get those two together, their kind of sense of humors. Because I think Bobby Heenan had a great one too. And he was a great heel manager. I heard someone say, you were something if you had Bobby Heenan as your manager. Because he was such a great heel manager. He could, get you as much heat as you needed to be as a heel. So, and Jesse says that Bobby was like, why do you always let Hennig beat the crap out of you? Well, because he's never really hurt him, never really injured him. And I think Larry and Curt both know that wrestling was not there to hurt your opponent. You were there to tell a story and to entertain the fans. I think that's the general rule, and just the way of Larry's demeanor. I'm a family man. I can't act like that. I can't say that kind of things. I'm sure Larry was religious as well. So, and most wrestlers were. Most wrestlers of his age were. So, I can't tell you how many things I've picked out, and I'm just like, this isn't Bible school, guys. This isn't Sunday school. But yeah, like I definitely would like to go deeper, I think, with Jesse and Larry. Did they have any, major feuds? Was it always Larry the baby face and Jesse the heel? Or did Jesse... I would actually like to ask Jesse if he was ever a baby face. I can't see it, but I'd like to know if it ever happens. Because I remember the first time they told me Rick Rude was a baby face. I went, what? Rick Rude, a baby face? No, come on, you're pulling a chain. And I looked and I thought, holy cow. Yeah, he was. I believe that was Jim Cornette that talked about that. He was like, yeah, he was a heel and everything, or a baby face and everything. I was like, I'm sorry. Are we talking about the same Rick Rude? Ravishing Rick Rude? A baby face? No. Because I was so used to the Ravishing Rick Rude character, which so many tried to imitate, but I don't think they did it as well. So there was Val Venus, who was like Rick Rude. He would pick women from the audience and kiss them, just like, Rick Rude would do. Sorry, not Rick Rude. Bye-bye. And I guess he was supposed to be some kind of a porn star or whatever, Val Venus, but, no, I think Rick Rude did it better. Sorry, but I think Rick Rude was better. No one could do what Ravishing Rick Rude did because Rude did it. You know what I mean? It's kind of like no one could be like Curt Hennig because Curt did it better. And I just love to hear stories of Larry Hennig. Oh, what was it like to fight him? Oh, well, you didn't really feel anything. Kind of like Curt, it goes along and I see where Curt got it all from. So the next thing we talk about is, and Tyrell had told me this before on his movie rendition of Clubhouse. He talks about that he went to high school with Joe Hennig, who is Curt's son. And I've had several fans now tell me, oh, you should talk to Joe. You should talk to Joe. Hey, I would love to talk to Joe. I would love to get more in depth with, some of the teachings that his father gave him, and just tell him that, I admired his father so much. I loved his father's wrestling and everything like that. So I would love to talk to Joe Hennig. If anyone knows how to get in touch with Joe Hennig, please let me know. But yeah, because they were kind of around the same age. So, I think Tyrell was born in 1980. So, but that's the great what ifs of, that generation is what would have happened if Tyrell would have been a wrestler, like Jesse. And, would it be like Tyrell versus Joe Hennig, Curtis Axel is Joe's, wrestling name. So, yeah, I often wondered, what it would be like to have Tyrell as a wrestler too, but as they say in the interview, Tyrell that wasn't Tyrell's thing. He didn't want to really do any of that stuff. And I think, I've said this to Tyrell before, I think if Jesse doesn't run for president, I definitely think Tyrell should. I would definitely, I would vote for Jesse, just as Curt said he voted for Jesse as governor. I would have voted for Jesse for president, and I think Curt would have too, if Curt was still alive. So, and I said that in the first interview. So, I definitely, and I think, Curt would have voted for Tyrell. If Tyrell has any ambitions about going into the political world. You absolutely don't have to, Tyrell, but I'm just saying, if you decide to and you want to, go for it. I definitely think it's something that Tyrell should definitely look into. But yeah, that is one of the great what ifs. What if Tyrell Ventura had become a wrestler like Joe Hennig? And I didn't follow Joe's career as much as I followed Curt's, but I did see an interview. Well, I saw on the Life and Times of Mr. Perfect. It was Larry talking about his grandson and how his grandson was going to be a great wrestler like Curt. No doubt, hands down, great wrestler. And Joe, if you're listening, or if you ever do get to listen to this, I do believe you have that drive in you that your dad had. And I also hope that maybe some of your dad's pranks kind of rubbed off on you. Maybe you were the king of the ribs like your dad. I don't know. But I would love to talk to Joe and get to know him and just hear, some more stories about Larry Hennig, about Curt Hennig, and, whatever he has to offer, whatever he's willing to talk about. Because I know for me, it would be very painful to talk about someone who is no longer with us and someone who meant a lot to you. I do remember that, Joe had said that his father, was his hero. Curt was his hero. And Curt's my hero too. So I know that would be very painful to talk about, someone who you looked up to and admired and they're no longer here. And we're going to talk about that a little later because Jesse does talk about, that subject. So, we did talk about, Jesse said that he went to Curt's funeral. And, just a little side warning, if I start tearing up, guys, I'm going to have to stop talking about this. But, and like I said, in another episode, I did have a fan ask me if I had planned on ever visiting Curt's grave. Yes. But I'm definitely going to need someone to be there with me so that I can cry like a little baby. And this doesn't give me any pleasure to talk about. Instead of talking about this, I wish we could say, oh, I wish I could, call up Curt and interview him. Unfortunately, unless I have an Ouija board, that's not gonna work. I can imagine Jesse being very emotional and Larry being very emotional. I can't imagine what it was like for Larry Hennig or how he felt to bury a son. I can't imagine it because I can't imagine burying my own. Oh boy, I'm starting to tear up. There's really not much I can say about this point other than, I know exactly what Jesse's talking about. It would be very hard for me to talk about this. And not that it was very easy for Jesse to talk about it. I'm sure it wasn't. But, boy, this is, it's really tough, to think that you can't talk to or meet your favorite wrestler. In my mind, Curt was the greatest wrestler to ever live. And knowing that I'd never get a chance to talk to him or get to meet him, get to shake his hand, because it's something I would love to do. I'd love to shake Curt's hand and just tell him, how much I admired him. Like I said, the day that I heard of Curt's passing, it didn't affect me as much as it does now. Like, I'm literally tearing up here, thinking about it. And I can't imagine what Larry was thinking at the time, or what anyone in Curt's family was thinking at the time. It's a very hard subject to talk about. So let's talk about something else, shall we? So the next thing we start talking about, on a happier note, we start talking about what was the one thing that Jesse could tell Curt today, if Curt was still alive. What was the one thing you could tell him and why? And he said, well, I would tell him that he's a great wrestler and he was at the top of his game, and, every dime he earned in wrestling, it was well deserved. I agree. And how Curt talks about, he had thrown that one figure out that he made $147 million. Even if that was fake, I think Curt deserved $147 billion because he was so good. So I agree with Jesse that everything Curt earned in wrestling, he deserved. He was a great mechanical wrestler, what they call a scientific wrestler. And of course I'm going to agree because Curt was the greatest wrestler to ever live. So I can't say that I disagree with Jesse. I completely agree with Jesse on this. And, he says, I loved broadcasting him. So he loved commentating Curt's matches. And as you all know from the first interview I did with Jesse, it was, I asked him who, Jeremiah was, and it was a nephew. So every time, it just seemed like every time that Curt would come out and you listen to Jesse talk, you know. But I remember the one time, I think it's on Primetime Wrestling. It was, and I don't even remember who Curt faced. I think it was, no, it wasn't, no. No, it was on Saturday Night's Main Event. Yeah, I don't remember who Curt wrestled, but I do remember Jesse goes, I know why he acts like that. It's his father. I went, wait a minute, Jesse, you cannot blame Larry Hennig for this. But no. I thought that was so funny. I was like, wait, you can't blame his father. Larry Hennig's not even in the ring. Curt was in the ring. But that was the whole Mr. Perfect thing, you know, when he was, I'm better than you because I'm perfect. I mean, he was better. I used to be on a bowling league, okay? And I was not as good as Curt was. I mean, anyone who was in my family, anyone who was anyone in my family, literally bowled. My grandmother, my mother, I did, my brother did. So, like, we come from a family of, like, bowlers. And I still couldn't have even come close to what Curt did. But he was an all-around athlete. And, you know, if you listen to, I was just watching a rendition of Nitro, and they were talking about how Ric Flair and Curt kind of were, like, similar. And I was like, well, yeah, they both are from Minnesota. They both had football careers. You gotta remember, Curt was so great at sports because he did it in school. You know, he did it in high school and he did it in college and stuff. So, I mean, I think if I remember correctly, Curt wanted to play football, but he injured himself, and that's when his dad kind of was like, well, come and be a wrestler. And Curt's like, okay. So, I mean, it, in a sense, I guess, see, I don't know. I think, I definitely think that, he was just phenomenal. He was a phenomenal athlete. And it got me to thinking, well, okay, so you're a great and big fan of Curt Hennig. What would you tell him? And why would you tell him that? I think everybody knows who has listened to this podcast by now knows what I would say to Curt. You're the greatest wrestler to ever live. Why do I say that? Because it's true. I'm sure Curt's ego, if he had one, would be going through the roof. And he'd be like, thanks, you know. No, I don't know. But I definitely would love to tell Curt that he was phenomenal. He was the greatest wrestler to ever live in my mind. So the last thing that we talk about is, of course, someone finally answers the age-old question I've been asking for the past, you know, couple of months is, what in the heck is bear hunting with a switch? You know, when I first heard this, I have to say, and I'm not trying to be graphic or anything, but honestly, it sounds like some weird sex position. You know what I mean? And like I said, I'm not trying to be graphic. But, I mean, when you first hear it, you're like, wait, what? I was, and everybody knows this, like I said, I was watching an interview. It was Curt and it was Larry Hennig. And you have Curt talk for like a few minutes. Okay. And you see Larry take the microphone like, yeah, I was up in Minnesota bear hunting with a switch. And I went, wait, what? It's like that double take. And you know, the greatest part is they did not show Curt's face. Because if I was Curt, I'd be like, Dad, really? Like I said, Curt has probably heard that joke so many times, it wasn't even funny anymore. But when you hear it for the first time, you're just like, What? What the heck is bear hunting with a switch? I've never even heard of this. And when Jesse says, well, it's when he hits the bear on the ass with the stick, and then I'm like, oh, it's like in the cartoons. It's yip, 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 where the bear just runs away, right? Oh, what the? What? Honestly, if I were there, I would be rolling on the floor laughing. I'd be like, Larry, you are just, okay, you win, okay? Wow, bear hunting with a switch. I mean, I've heard of spanking someone with a switch, but I've never heard of bear hunting with a switch. I mean, it just sounds like, you know, what are you doing? Giving the bear an advantage over you? You know, something that could actually come back and attack you? Well, you missed. Now it's my turn. Oh my gosh. Bear hunting with a switch. Yeah, that was a new one. I just love how he takes the microphone and, well, I was up, you know, I have 5 kids and Kurt's one of them. I'm thinking, does he go bear hunting with a switch? Does Curt do the same thing? Smack the bear on the ass and the bear goes, yipe, 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 yipe. Very interesting things what you do when you go hunting. Look, I've never been hunting, but really, chef's kiss. Okay. So it kind of wraps up this whole interview, and again, I'd like to thank, you know, Tyrell, and I'd like to thank Jesse for the whole getting me up right before Kurt's birthday. So we did actually, you know, and like I said, I kind of wanted to have a backup plan in case, you know, Jim Cornette did not answer my email. And when he did, I was so excited, so happy. But then I was like, uh-oh, well, now they got me up. Now I'm going to talk about Curt because it's Kurt's birthday, or it was Kurt's birthday the next day. And, well, I already have the Jim Cornette all ready to go, all set. And I didn't even have it go live. You know, I had the Jim Cornette thing all done and finished before the 28th and even before the 27th. You know, even before I talked to Jesse on the 27th. So I was just like, well, I'll just kind of do this. And, I mean, I already have something for Kurt's birthday. I honestly wonder, wherever Curt is he like smiling about all this? Is he going, yeah, I know I have fans. But I often wonder, you know, like I said, whatever gets you through the night, right? I said that in my last episode. But honestly, I do believe Joe when he says that Kurt's still around. You know, energy goes somewhere. It doesn't go away. It doesn't die. It goes somewhere. So all the energy that Curt had, I'm sure something remained. But I often wonder, you know, what Curt would think about this podcast. So wherever you are, Curt, I hope you like this. But I also want to do a couple of really interesting episodes coming up here. I would love to do one just dedicated to Larry Hennig. So I wouldn't be surprised if I do another interview with Jesse, you know, just completely about Larry Hennig. You know, because I believe Jesse would probably have more insight on Larry than, you know, Jim Cornette maybe. I think Curt would really enjoy that if we just did like one whole episode to his father and the great Larry Hennig. And I think we could also come, you know, kind of show Larry's funny side. You know, this is where Curt got it, so, you know, we could show kind of that. And I would love to do like maybe a watch along to maybe some of the Larry's matches. And I also would like to do a watch along on my own terms, some of Curt's matches. I think we'll have some maybe AWA in there, maybe some Portland matches, and then, of course, we could do some WWF. I would love to do, like, a watch-along of some of the interviews that Jesse did with Curt. Because I wonder at one point, and I kind of do want to ask Jesse about that, if he kind of remembers those interviews where, you know, I just love it when Curt's like, of course, it's perfect. Now, if you please excuse me. And Jesse looks at the camera and goes, you talk about manners. I just would kind of like to get Jesse's, what he thought of those, interviews at the time. But, I definitely would like to do some watch-alongs of, and like I said, we'll do some of, on the episode of just Larry Hennig, we'll just do, you know, we'll do a little rendition of him. I'll probably try to get another interview with Jesse. I know I tried to get one this past Wednesday on my birthday. And like I said, the audio wasn't working. So, I will definitely try to get, at least a couple more interviews. One about Larry Hennig, just all about Larry Hennig. And then one about when he interviewed Curt and what he thought about that. So, and then there's one more episode, a special episode I'd like to do, and it would be my tribute to Curt, my ultimate tribute to him, do an episode of just Rick Rude. And I say that because Rick and Curt were the best of friends, and I know that they thought each other were, you know, they had some great stories, road stories, you know, and they've known each other since, I think Curt said, since middle school. So, I think that would be the ultimate tribute to Curt, is to do something about Rick Rude, or on Rick Rude. And I do think, like I said, Rick was a good wrestler, Curt was better. But I did enjoy, and I still like to watch that Super Pose Down. I think I was saying this in the other episode. I like to watch that Super Pose Down with the Warrior and Rick Rude. And like I said, Rick Rude had the better body, except the only problem was the person who I thought won the pose down wasn't even in the pose down. And that was Curt Hennig. Curt has a great body. All right. So anyway, I just, wherever you are, Curt, I hope you like this. We're going to do your dad, and then we're going to do Rick Rude. And, of course, we're going to do some watch-alongs of just like I said, some Portland matches, some of my favorite Portland matches, and then we could also do some watch-alongs of, SummerSlam 91, him and Brett. I would love to do some watch-alongs of his babyface run. So, like, we're talking, like, 92, 93. Especially, like, we could do a watch-along of when he turns babyface, and I'll just, I'll be like, oh, well, this is what I would say, that kind of thing. But I would like to do some watch-alongs, and we would definitely do, an episode just dedicated to Larry Hennig, and then, of course, dedicated to Rick Rude. So, if I didn't say it already, thank you so much for supporting this podcast, and thank you so much for listening and subscribing to wherever you're listening. Whatever country or whatever city in the United States or outside. And I've had some people from Canada actually listen too, probably because I said the name Bret Hart. Hey, Bret was close friends with Curt too. I would not be opposed to doing an episode just about Bret. I do have Bret's book. I am reading it and really opening my eyes on a lot of things that happened in Bret's life. So, I kind of wish, and this is just my thing, I kind of wish that Curt had written a book. I think if he was still alive today, I think there would be like a Mr. Perfect book, I think it would be great, to know the life and times of Curt, from his own mouth, from his own words, his own mindset. And I think it would kind of be like Bret, I could see him and Bret kind of having the same thoughts. But, and I would own that book, trust me. I would love it. But I honestly do think we should at least have one one episode dedicated to the great Bret Hart. Good. He was good. Curt was great. So says Curt in the WCW interview he did once. But anyway, I do want to extend that to Bret Hart, and if anyone can figure out how to get a hold of Bret Hart, I would love to interview Bret about Curt. I just think he would say. I would love to get the ins and outs, and I would love to get deeper on this stuff that Bret talked about. You know, how they would try to make each other laugh in the ring. I would love to get a deeper insight on that. So, again, thank you so much for your support. Thank you for subscribing. Like I said, if you'd like to become a Patreon, you can go to patreon.com, and in the search field, you go to Mr. Perfect is Perfect with the spaces in between the words. I have between $3 and $6, so you can join at $3, and I will start giving shout outs to you. And then the $6 ones is shout outs plus something extra. So, again, thank you for your support. And if you want to become a Patreon, go to patreon.com. Mr. Perfect is Perfect in the search field. All right, this is the end of this episode and rendition of Curt Hennig was the best. Change My Mind, episode 4. Stay tuned for more episodes. Like I said, we're going to do some really special things, special episodes. So remember, everybody, nobody beats Mr. Perfect. Nobody.